Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's deep dive. Today is March 8, 2026, and we are stepping right into the middle of a massive, rapidly evolving global event.
We really are. We're now in the second week of the escalating conflict between the United States, Israeli coalition, and Iran.
Yeah. And if you've been following the news at all, you know the volume of updates. It's just staggering.
It's completely staggering. I mean, the situation on the ground is changing literally by the hour. We are seeing major shifts in military strategy, profound changes in regional leadership, and
And immediate shocks to the global economy.
right, exactly. Keeping track of how all these moving parts connect is the real challenge here.
And that is exactly our mission for today. We have a very heavy, comprehensive daily news briefing right in front of us. And we're going to break down the source material to figure out what is actually happening.
Because there's a lot to sort through.
There is. We're looking at the realities on the battlefield, the chaos inside the government, and how this is already, hitting your wallet. Now, a quick focus note for this deep dive.
Oh, right, the language.
Exactly. I want to promise you, our listener, that we are going to keep the language simple and the pace steady today.
The ideas are complex enough. We don't need to make the vocabulary complicated, too.
Right. We want to make sure these massive global events are totally accessible. So we'll avoid the really complicated geopolitical jargon. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the human cost, because the numbers are shifting in a way that reveals a lot about the actual nature of this war.
The human toll is always the most immediate reality, and the briefing gives us a very grim update today. The Pentagon has officially confirmed the death of a 7th American service member.
Right. And what really stands out in the report is the timeline of this specific casualty.
Yeah, the timeline is important.
This soldier did not die in a new engagement today. They had actually been fighting for their life in a hospital since an attack on a Saudi base back on March 1st.
Which highlights a tough reality of modern military medical care. Casualties from a single strike can unfold over days or even weeks. But while the military numbers are climbing, the briefing specifically draws our attention to the civilian impact,
Which is expanding, right?
expanding far beyond the borders of the countries actually fighting.
I am looking at the note right now about the 2 civilian migrant workers.
Yes. The briefing details the deaths of 2 individuals, one from India and one from Bangladesh.
Wow.
They were living in a housing complex in Saudi Arabia when a projectile hit their building. They were killed instantly.
What's fascinating here, and I say that fully acknowledging how tragic the situation is, how a conflict labeled as a regional war actually throws a net over the entire globe.
It really does.
We have 2 men from South Asia who likely traveled to the Gulf solely for economic reasons,
Right,
just working to support their families.
right.
And suddenly they become casualties in a war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
It completely redefines who is at risk. I mean, when military planners talk about a Middle East conflict, the maps focus on local borders. But the modern Gulf economy relies heavily on an international workforce.
Millions of people.
Millions! Foreign nationals build the infrastructure, they manage the logistics, they keep the daily economy running. These workers have absolutely no stake in the political outcome.
They aren't combatants.
Not at all. Yet, because they are geographically present, they are caught in the crossfire.
It really makes you rethink the way we consume the news. You scroll through your feed and see alerts about coalitions and missile defense systems.
Just abstract tactical updates.
Exactly. But behind every single one of those headlines, real families are being shattered. There are families thousands of miles away in South Asia getting the worst phone call imaginable today.
That human reality really underpins everything we are analyzing. And as the conflict enters its second week, the strategies are shifting in a way that guarantees the civilian toll will only increase.
That brings us directly to the strategic pivot we saw around February 28th. The briefing outlines a massive shift from hitting traditional military targets to what we can only describe as an infrastructure war.
A total change in tactics.
Yeah. In the opening days, the U.S. and Israel focused on military bases and launch sites. But now, they are systematically targeting the energy grid. Specifically, they're going after fuel depots and massive oil storage facilities inside Iran.
The visual evidence of this shift is extreme. The descriptions coming from residents in the capital city of Tehran are harrowing.
Our sources quote residents calling the scene apocalyptic.
Apocalyptic is the word they used, yeah.
They describe thick, heavy black smoke completely filling the sky over the city. The smoke is so dense that it literally made the day turn into night.
Just incredibly dark.
But looking at this purely from a strategic standpoint, why the shift? If the goal is to neutralize a military threat, why focus on oil storage?
Well, the military logic is actually quite straightforward. A modern military force simply cannot operate without a massive continuous supply of fuel.
Right.
Tanks, transport trucks, fighter jets, even the radar generators, they all run on local energy supplies. The strategy is to bleed the Iranian military of its physical resources.
So if they don't have fuel,
If they cannot fuel their vehicles, they cannot maneuver. They can't sustain an organized defense or offense.
but wait, when you destroy a fuel depot near a major metropolitan area like Tehran, you aren't just starving the military.
No, you aren't.
You are instantly crippling the civilian population. You cannot separate the military energy grid from the civilian reality.
That is the immense friction of this strategy. The cascading effects of destroying fuel infrastructure hit civilians immediately. Think about it. Without fuel, emergency services collapse.
Ambulances can't run.
Ambulances cannot transport the wounded. Food distribution networks freeze because trucks cannot make deliveries to grocery stores.
Wow.
Eventually, the power grid fails and the lights go out. The military might be the intended target, but the civilian population absorbs the immediate shockwave.
And it goes even deeper than fuel. The briefing details another critical infrastructure target that crosses the line into basic human survival.
The water supply.
Exactly. We are looking at the beginning of a water war. The source material notes that desalination plants are now being actively targeted.
This is a profound escalation.
Let's pause for a second. For you, our listener, we promise to keep things simple. Can you quickly explain what desalination is?
Absolutely. Much of that region lacks natural fresh water sources. They don't have abundant rivers or deep underground lakes.
Right.
So they rely entirely on industrial desalination. These are massive, highly technical facilities that take salty ocean water and turn it into fresh, safe drinking water.
So these facilities are the literal lifeblood of the cities.
Without them, there is no drinking water, period.
And the briefing specifies that the U.S. recently struck a desalination plant on Qeshm Island, which is Iranian territory.
Yeah.
And in direct retaliation, Iran struck a water facility in Bahrain. Now, to be absolutely clear to you, our listener, we are strictly reporting the events detailed in the briefing here. We are not taking sides or making moral judgments on the actions of the U.S., Israel, or Iran.
Right. Our focus is purely on the factual breakdown of this vital infrastructure.
But objectively speaking, hitting water facilities is huge.
It represents a very dangerous new phase. Desalination plants are incredibly fragile. They rely on complex filtration systems, high-pressure pumps, and, crucially, massive amounts of energy.
Oh, which ties right back to the fuel depots.
Exactly. Even if a water plant isn't directly bombed, if you cut the fuel supply to the region, the plant cannot operate.
So we are looking at millions of people facing the sudden loss of drinking water. And repairing these facilities isn't like fixing a broken water pipe in your street.
No, it requires specialized parts and engineers. And those are impossible to secure in the middle of a bombing campaign.
When basic survival systems are weaponized like this, the pressure on the government becomes existential.
Which perfectly transitions us into the political scramble happening right now in Tehran.
Right, because this infrastructure collapse is happening at the exact moment. The Iranian government is totally paralyzed by a power vacuum.
The briefing reminds us that the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, died about a week ago.
The timing of his death has created an incredibly volatile situation. The supreme leader is the ultimate political and religious authority in the country.
Losing that figurehead during peacetime is disruptive enough. Losing him during an active, escalating war creates immense internal vulnerability.
State media is claiming that top clerics are currently rushing to pick a successor. Right now, all eyes are on his son, Mojtaba Khamenei. He seems to be the leading candidate to take control.
But this internal selection process is not happening in a vacuum. The international pressure is overwhelming.
We see that pressure clearly in the recent comments from U.S. President Trump. In a very blunt interview, Trump stated that whoever the clerics as the new leader won't last long unless they get a green light from the United States.
Don't last long. That is an incredibly aggressive diplomatic stance.
He is essentially saying the U.S. gets veto power over Iran's sovereign leadership choice.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the high stakes of the coalition's goals become clear. The United States is signaling that they don't just want a simple ceasefire.
They don't just want the shooting to stop.
No, they want a fundamentally different leadership. By demanding approval over the next supreme leader, They are pushing for a complete change in Iran's political identity.
But practically speaking, how viable is that? You have a country under massive bombardment, its capital is covered in black smoke, its water supply is threatened,
Yeah.
and the U.S. is demanding they completely change their core leadership structure. Doesn't asking a country to do that usually backfire? Doesn't it force a government to dig in deeper?
Historically, yes, it is a monumentally difficult objective. You are asking a hardliner establishment to voluntarily dismantle its own authority while under military threat.
It seems unlikely.
The internal factions, the military, the clerics, the intelligence services, they are much more likely to unify against an external demand for regime change than they are to simply surrender their power.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In most conflicts, diplomats are desperately working behind the scenes to build an off-ramp.
An exit strategy.
Right. They want a peaceful solution where both sides can declare a minor victory, save face, and just stop shooting.
But when one side openly demands a fundamental change in the opponent's leadership, that off-ramp vanishes.
It makes finding peace so much harder.
It forces the conflict into a zero-sum game. If the condition for peace is the end of the current government, then the current government has absolutely no incentive to stop fighting.
They are fighting for their own survival.
And when survival is on the line, the restrictions on how you fight tend to disappear entirely.
Now, I want to bring this directly to you, the listener. We have been deep in the geopolitical weeds of Tehran and the Gulf.
We have.
You might be listening to this from your kitchen, or maybe on your commute, thousands of miles away from the Middle East. And you might be asking yourself, why should you care about this if you live so far away? Why does a damaged water plant or a political scramble matter to your daily life?
It is the most important question you can ask, and the briefing provides a very sharp, very clear answer. It all comes down to the global economy.
Let's look at the actual data. In the United States, gas prices at the pump have shot up 16% in just over a week.
16%.
That is a massive, immediate financial hit to anyone who drives a car, or really anyone who buys goods transported by truck.
And we can trace that 16% jump directly to one specific geographic cause, the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, let's keep it simple. What is the Strait of Hormuz, and why is it a bottleneck?
Well, a bottleneck is just a narrow space where traffic gets squeezed. Think of a really wide highway that suddenly shrinks down to just one single lane. Everything slows down or stops.
Okay, that makes sense.
The Strait of Hormuz is a tiny, narrow stretch of water connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. And roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply travels through that single lane on massive tanker ships.
20% of the whole world's oil.
Yes. Under normal conditions, it is a heavily congested highway of global energy.
But the briefing describes it right now as a ghost town.
A complete ghost town. Because the risk has simply become too high, commercial shipping operates on risk assessment and insurance. The companies that own these massive tankers are terrified their ships will be attacked.
I mean, the airspace above the strait is filled with projectiles.
Exactly. A single misfired missile hitting a fully loaded oil tanker would be an environmental and financial catastrophe. So the operators have simply ordered their captains to drop anchor and wait.
They refuse to enter the strait.
The oil is physically trapped.
I am looking at the comments from U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright in the briefing. He stated he hopes the ships will start moving again in a few weeks.
A few weeks?
Yeah, possibly, with U.S. Navy escorts protecting the commercial vessels.
A few weeks might sound somewhat optimistic for a politician, but in the context of global energy markets, a few weeks is an absolute eternity.
Because supply chains operate on a tight schedule. They don't have months of extra fuel just sitting around.
Precisely. When 20% of the world's daily energy supply is suddenly removed from the board, the markets panic immediately.
And that panic drives up the price.
Which translates directly to that 16% jump you are already seeing at the gas pump. If the strait remains closed for a few weeks, that 16% increase is likely just the beginning.
So what does this all mean?
It means the world is incredibly interconnected. A military decision to strike a fuel depot in the Middle East instantly scares a shipping executive in Europe. That executive stops a ship from moving in the Gulf, and that directly removes money from your wallet at your local gas station.
It is a stark reminder of how fragile everything is.
It really is.
As we gently wrap up this deep dive, we need to summarize what we're really seeing here. We are witnessing an intense shift toward total war tactics. It is no longer just military forces fighting on a battlefield.
It's the systematic dismantling of the infrastructure required for human life. Water, fuel, electricity.
And the briefing clearly shows that the violence is spreading. It notes funerals in Lebanon and a sharp increase in violence across the West Bank. The conflict is leaving the other side with very little to lose.
The friction is sparking secondary fires across the entire region.
Before we sign off, this raises a really important question.
I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to ponder on your own.
Go ahead.
This conflict highlights how heavily modern human survival relies on massive, fragile infrastructure. Things like desalination plants and international shipping straits. We spend our days completely relying on complex, hidden systems that we never actually see.
We just take the water from the tap and the fuel at the pump completely for granted.
Exactly. So I want you to consider your own city or your own country. If the complex, hidden systems that bring you your drinking water and your daily fuel were suddenly turned off, how resilient would your own community actually be?
That is a chilling thought.
How long could your neighborhood sustain itself if the invisible machinery of modern life just stopped working? It is a sober thought, but understanding that fragility is key to understanding the sheer gravity of what is happening in the world today.
It really puts everything into perspective. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We know the material is heavy, but breaking it down clearly is the only way to truly understand it.
Absolutely.
We warmly encourage you to keep learning, question the headlines, and stay curious. We will catch you next time.